The first thing I noticed about Gretchen Halley was her hands. She kept them flat on the table when she talked. Not folded, not fidgeting, flat like she was trying to hold something down. She ran the night rotation at the Mammoth Hot Springs Ranger Station for 11 years before I was assigned to work under her. I heard about her before I ever met her. Other rangers mentioned her the way you mention someone who has survived something without specifying what. Reliable, they said. Thorough. Doesn't talk much on slow nights. I thought I understood what that meant. I didn't. Gretchen had a habit of stopping mid-sentence when she was outside at night, not trailing off. Stopping, she would freeze mid-word, turn her head slightly toward the dark, and listen. Then she would finish the sentence like nothing had happened. The first few times I thought I had imagined it. By the third week I stopped thinking that. She wasn't a warm person. That's not a criticism. Some people carry too much of a place inside them to have room left over for small talk. Gretchen had been absorbing Yellowstone after dark for over a decade, and whatever she had accumulated had changed the way she moved through the world. Carefully, deliberately, like someone who had learned that certain mistakes could only be made once. I was 26 when I started working nights at Mammoth. I had trained in wilderness search and rescue for 3 years before the Park Service posted the position. I thought the hardest part would be the cold. I packed for that. I prepared for wildlife briefings and river terrain and altitude. I did not prepare for what Gretchen told me on my first shift. She poured 2 cups of coffee from a machine that sounded like it was suffering, carried both to the table, and sat down. She put her hands flat. She told me there were 6 things I needed to know. Not suggestions, not folklore. Things. Not the training manual, not the protocols I had spent weeks memorizing. Something else entirely. She said every rule existed because someone before me had not known about it at the right moment. She did not elaborate on what had happened to those people. She recited the rules the way a pilot reads a pre-flight checklist. Mechanically, without drama. The first one stopped me cold. If you find a campfire burning with no one around it, do not approach it. Radio it in. Mark the coordinates. Leave. I held the coffee and waited for her to smile. She did not smile. She said the fire would still be burning when the day crew checked it in the morning. The wood would not be lower. Just write it down and drive away. That was how I met the rules. 6 of them, recited across a table while wind pressed against the station windows and the parking lot sat empty in the dark. The second rule came up 6 weeks later, on a Tuesday night in early October when I was alone at the radio desk. Static broke open around 2 in the morning. That was not unusual, but this was different. Voices. On a channel that was not listed in the frequency handbook. Clear, patient, taking turns. Not emergency traffic. Not ranger to ranger. Just 2 people talking. Gretchen had said, if your radio receives a channel that isn't on the list, write down everything you hear. Do not respond. I pulled out my log sheet. The voices talked for 17 minutes. I wrote down every word. Some of it sounded ordinary. 2 people discussing weather, water levels, a route. But the route they described did not exist in any trail registry. The coordinates they gave placed them northwest of Sheepheater Cliff, in a section of the park with no maintained path, and no reason for anyone to be there at 2 in the morning in October. I showed the log to Gretchen the next evening. She read it, folded it, and placed it in a metal box in the bottom drawer of the gear cabinet. She did not explain the box, but there were other pages already inside it. I could see that much before she closed the drawer. The third rule did not happen to me. It happened to a ranger named Owen, filling in on a night I had off. He was doing a trail check along Beaver Lake and stopped near the shoreline to check a water gauge. He saw his own reflection. He looked at it twice. Gretchen's rule applies: if you see your reflection in open water after midnight, do not look again. Owen came back to the station, wrote his report, clocked out normally, but he stopped working nights 2 weeks later and transferred to visitor services. I saw him once after that in the employee parking lot. He did not look like the same person. He looked like someone who had moved a piece of furniture and found something underneath that changed the geometry of the room permanently. I asked Gretchen what Owen had seen the second time. She said no one who had looked twice had ever described it the same way. One ranger, years before my arrival, had said the reflection had already been looking up before he looked down. I have not looked at my reflection in water after dark since she told me that. The fourth rule arrived in my second winter, during a search north of Obsidian Cliff. I was moving along a tree line when I saw an elk walking toward me. What was unusual was that it was not looking at me. It was watching the ground ahead of its own feet, but walking in a straight line toward where I was standing. Gretchen had been specific. If an animal moves toward you without looking at you, back away. Do not make a sound. I stepped heel to toe across the snow until I was clear. The elk walked through the exact space where I had been standing. It did not alter its path. It did not acknowledge me. It disappeared into the trees. I stood still for a long time after. The snow where the elk passed was undisturbed. Here is what I understand now, 3 years in. The rules are not random. Each one names a category. The fire that does not consume itself. The frequency that belongs to no station. The reflection that exists on its own schedule. The animal that moves through a person rather than toward one. The tent zipped from the inside with no occupant remaining. The mileage on your odometer when you wake up somewhere you did not choose to stop. I do not understand what any of them are. I do not think Gretchen does either. But the metal box in the bottom drawer has more pages in it now. I have added several myself. I do not know who reads them. I know Gretchen still puts her hands flat on the table when she talks. I have started doing it too without meaning to. I noticed it for the first time last month. I was sitting across from a new ranger on his first shift, trying to explain what I was about to tell him. And my palms were pressing down against the wood without me deciding to do it. I have thought about that since. What Gretchen was holding down, whether she knew, whether it matters. I have not found an answer I trust.